Senator Cruz is known as a world-class debater, having won national championships while an undergrad at Princeton before he went to Harvard Law School. And I'm sure that we're all excited to see those debate skills on full display later this summer in just 2 short months. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said about Senators Rubio and Paul, Senator Cruz also on March 23rd of this year had a special announcement for all of us. He is running for the Republican nomination to President of the United States. And I'm sure he'll share with you now more about that and more about his solid track record on the issues that motivate, animate, and inspire you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator Ted Cruz. Go get him.
Thank you so much, Kellyanne. Thank you, everyone. God bless the Faith and Freedom Coalition. And God bless Concerned Women of America. I'm thrilled to be back with so many friends today. You know, today the body of Christ is in mourning. I want to begin by just reflecting on the horrific tragedy of last night at the Emmanuel AME Church, that a sick and deranged person came and prayed with an historically black congregation for an hour and then murdered 9 innocent souls. Christians across our nation, across the world, believers across the world are lifting up the congregants at Emmanuel AME. And I just want to begin with a moment of silence, remembering those who were murdered last night. It's a new morning. A new morning, and we're gathered here today focused on our country, focused on the threats facing our nation. We have leaders in our midst. This is a gathering of leaders. Every one of you, Ralph Reed, what an extraordinary leader Ralph Reed is. He is tenacious. I'm pretty sure he never sleeps. And I have photographic proof that even if he does sleep, when he sleeps, he's smiling. He brings a spirit of joy and utter determination to the task at hand of motivating people of faith to stand up and take our nation back. And I also want to say a word about my friend Penny Nance. Penny is extraordinary. Concerned Women of America are an army of women on the ground in all 50 states standing up for our nation. I'll tell you, I am profoundly optimistic that we're going to turn our nation around, and the reason I'm optimistic is because of the leaders who are gathered here today. The reason I'm optimistic is because each and every one of you standing up and leading and taking on the forces of darkness, the threats that face our nation. What I want to do this afternoon, there are many, many issues we could talk about. We could talk about jobs and the economy. We could talk about taxes and regulatory reform. But I want to talk about an issue that I think will be front and center in 2016, and that is religious liberty. I believe 2016 will be the religious liberty election. Religious liberty has never been more threatened in America than right now today. And let's talk about religious liberty both at home and abroad. At home, like many of the men and women in this room, I've spent decades fighting to defend religious liberty. When I was the Solicitor General of Texas, I was proud to defend the Ten Commandments monument on the state capitol grounds. We went to the U.S. Supreme Court and we won 5-4. I was proud to defend the Pledge of Allegiance, the words, "One nation under God." We went to the Supreme Court and we won unanimously. And then in private practice, I was proud to join with my good friend Kelly Shackelford in representing over 3 million veterans, pro bono for free, defending the Mojave Desert Veterans Memorial. A lone white Latin cross erected over 70 years ago to honor the men and women who gave their lives in World War I. The ACLU sued, seeking to tear down that monument, and they won in the district court. They won in the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals literally ordered that a plywood box be built around the monument to hide it, because they said you could not gaze upon the image of a cross on federal land. Well, I'll tell you this, they're right in one thing. The cross has power. And I was proud to represent 3 million veterans before the U.S. Supreme Court defending that monument, and we won 5-4. The battles today have only intensified. Religious liberty. In fact, just this week, I think the EPA has named religious liberty an endangered species. That would be funnier if it weren't so profoundly true. Listen, every one of us, our hearts broke a couple of months ago in Indiana and Arkansas. Indiana and Arkansas, the battle over religious liberty there was heartbreaking. It was a perfect storm of the modern Democratic Party and big business came together. You know, there was a time when religious liberty brought us together, when it was a bipartisan priority, where we might say, you know, Democrats and Republicans will disagree on marginal tax rates. But when it comes to defending the protections of the First Amendment for every one of us to worship and seek out and follow the Lord God Almighty with all of our hearts, minds, and souls, on that we stand as one. Sadly, that is no longer the case. The modern Democratic Party has decided that their commitment to mandatory gay marriage in all 50 states trumps any willingness to defend the First Amendment. 2 decades ago, Congress passed the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Had the support of such famed right-wing nutcases as Ted Kennedy, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden. Was signed into law by a Democrat, Bill Clinton. That law was substantively identical to what both Indiana and Arkansas took up. And yet today's Democratic Party, aided by their friends in the media, and aided even more by big business that decided it was good business to throw Christians overboard and to abandon religious liberty, pounded upon leaders there. And I'll tell you what was saddest. Just how many Republicans ran for the hills. I think Indiana was, as Ronald Reagan would have put it, a time for choosing. As William Barrett Travis in Texas put it when he drew a line in the sand, you choose which side of the line you're on. More than a few Republicans, sadly, even more than a few Republicans running for president in 2016, chose that moment somehow to go rearrange their sock drawer. I'll tell you this. I will never, ever, ever shy from standing up and defending the religious liberty of every American. Let me tell you the story of a couple I met in Iowa. Dick and Betty Odegaard, a wonderful couple. They have a farm with an old historic church on that farm. For years, the Odegaards hosted weddings in this church, and they made a business of catering the weddings. It's how they helped provide for their livelihood. Well, a couple of years ago, two gay men wanted to have a wedding in the Odegaards' church. Now, the Odegaards are devout Mennonites, and they said, no, I'm sorry, we cannot host this. This is inconsistent with our faith. The Odegaards found themselves drawn into litigation, extended legal battle. Ultimately, they wrote a check for $5,000 and promised never again to host a wedding in that church. Religious liberty is under assault. Now, all of us are aware in a couple of weeks the Supreme Court is going to issue a decision concerning marriage. And I would encourage everyone here to be lifting up in prayer the court, that they not engage in an act of naked and lawless judicial activism, tearing down the marriage laws adopted pursuant to the Constitution. But to underscore the threat to religious liberty, one need look no further than an exchange during that oral argument, where Justice Alito asked the Obama Solicitor General, Don Verrilli, if the Obama administration prevails and you convince this court to attempt to strike down the marriage laws of every state, would the next step be that the IRS will start going after Christian schools, Christian universities, Christian charities, and next after that, Christian churches? Any institutions that follow a biblical teaching of marriage, or for that matter, Jewish schools, Mormon schools, any institution that follows religious teachings, and the answer from the Obama administration to the U.S. Supreme Court is yes. That is a very real possibility that the next step is the IRS coming after schools, universities, charities. This is a time where we decide who we are, what we believe. We are a nation that was founded by men and women fleeing religious oppression. We're a nation that was founded. There is a reason why religious liberty is the very first protection in the very first amendment to the Bill of Rights, because it is all foundational. We cannot stand unless we first are on our knees. And we look at religious liberty at home. Abroad, it's even worse. Abroad, we're right now seeing religious persecution at a level that is horrifying. And we have a president who refuses to acknowledge it. You cannot defeat radical Islamic terrorism with a president who's unwilling to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. We remember several months ago the horrific terrorist attack in Paris that the president inexplicably described as a, quote, random act of violence. When radical Islamists with butcher knives go into a kosher deli seeking to murder Jews because of their Jewish faith, there ain't nothing random about that. It is a naked and transparent act of anti-Semitism and religious bigotry, and it needs to be called out for precisely what it is. When ISIS beheaded 21 Coptic Christians. The White House put out a statement that said they were killed because of their Egyptian citizenship. You know, Pope Francis powerfully observed, their blood confesses Jesus Christ. In Kenya, 147 Christians were murdered by al-Shabaab, radical Islamic terrorists. And just to make it transparently clear for this administration, they sorted among the people and asked, if you were a Muslim, you were spared. If you were a Christian, you were shot in the back of the head, execution style. 147 Christians on Good Friday. If you go to the White House and read the statement on the massacre in Kenya, you will search in vain for the words Christian or Islam. We must speak the truth. The truth has power. It has power when we speak up for Pastor Saeed Abedini, wrongfully imprisoned. It had power when the men and women in this room spoke up for Miriam Ibrahim, wrongfully imprisoned. It has power when the men and women in this room stand up and speak out for the nation of Israel. Can you imagine 6 years ago if I'd have told you that Prime Minister Netanyahu would come to address a joint session of Congress, and the President, the Vice President, and the entire cabinet would boycott the Prime Minister of Israel? That's how bad things have gotten. And yet, the Word tells us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And I'll tell you this, morning is coming. Morning is coming. And the men and women in this room are going to play a critical role. Our country's at a crossroads. If people of faith stand up and lead, if the leaders in this room, each and every one of you in your communities, you have a circle of influence. Friends, family, pastors, that as you reach out, there are right now about 90 million evangelical Christians in America. 50 million evangelicals are staying home. 50 million. Reagan Democrats, blue-collar, working-class Catholics, up and down the Midwest, up into New England. If we're going to turn the country around, the work that Ralph and Penny are doing, the work that every one of you are doing to turn out people of faith, it's a real simple formula. If people of faith show up, if we stand for our faith and our liberty and the Constitution, we will win and turn the country around. And so I'm going to close with a quick story. I mentioned morning is coming. We can find the date that morning will come. It will be January 20th, 2017. On January 20th, 2017, a little old man walks up to the front gate of the White House. Young Marines standing there, standing guard. The little old man says, "Excuse me, sir, is Barack Obama here?" And then the Marine says, "I'm sorry, Barack Obama is no longer president of the United States." The next day, January 21st, same little old man comes up to the same Marine and asks the same question, "Sir, is Barack Obama here?" He says, "No, sir, Barack Obama is no longer president of the United States. The third day, he comes up, now January 22nd, same little old man, same Marine. He says, "Excuse me, sir, is Barack Obama here?" At this point, the Marine is frustrated. He sighs. He says, "Sir, I've told you 3 days in a row, Barack Obama is no longer president of the United States." And the little old man, with a twinkle in his eye, he goes, "I know that. I just love hearing you say it." And the Marine stands to attention, salutes, and says, "See you tomorrow, sir." Morning is coming, and it is thanks to each and every one of you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
They've asked me to be the skunk at the garden party.